host of Chartrand. I'm joined by artist Kristi Beisecker, who happens to be one of our participating artists coming up for the 25 Artist Shanties season. And we're so happy to be able to talk to you today about your work, a little bit about you. And let's start with the fact that I love the area you happen to live in on the Cape in Eastham. You spend a lot of time in Eastham. You also live off Cape as well. Let's talk a little bit about you. You do very interesting photography. But first, let's talk a little bit about you and your background.
Okay. I grew up off Cape in a suburb outside of Boston, and I went to college in a small liberal arts community in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and that's kind of where I grew up artistically. That's where I went to school and kind of developed my artistic practice, and that's where I discovered this photography.
Very cool. So let's talk a little bit about the photography that you do. You also do a little bit of graphic work. Do you think the two of them connect for you in some way?
Definitely. It's kind of where I found the others. So like I feel like they connect almost, they go back and forth. So I feel like a lot of my graphic design skills are played out in the photography and vice versa. So it's definitely connected, and I feel like I use both skills like throughout both processes.
All right, so let's talk about this photography, because it's not your usual photograph we're going to be looking at. So take us through the process, and even from where you first discovered, was it something that you didn't mean to do, that then that's what, you know what I mean, where you went to do one step and it turned out completely different, and then you took that further? Is that really?
Yeah, it was kind of like that. I was highly into spirituality, and I was developing my spiritual side at the time I discovered it, and I just thought there wasn't a whole lot of artistic production of that process, and it was mostly used for scientific means. So like they would take an object or a leaf and photograph it, and you would get the pattern of the leaf, and then it would be something more scientific rather than artistic. So I thought I could probably just turn that whole around and make something artistic out of that. And so it was a lot of experimentation. Like the entire process is experimental. It tends to, when you go into it, you're not sure what you're going to expect out of it. So you may have some idea because of the object or the shape of the object or the shape of the leaf, but then when you go into it, it turns out something completely different.
Okay, and how do you do that?
I go in the darkroom, so it's a darkroom setup.
Which is very traditional. I love that that's where you're at with this.
Yeah, it's very traditional, which has some downsides to it. I mean, it's not always available, and I have to kind of make it up as I go a little bit, because I have to find the space and then just set up everything and take it down. So it's not always convenient, but when I do get time to make it, I just make a whole bunch at once, and then I have a body of work for a couple of years, and then I start making some again after that. But once I go into the darkroom, I have a device that outputs the electricity, which my dad actually built. So I have no like scientific knowledge of how that device is built. I have like a rough idea, but that's all I need. Like I don't need to know how like the pieces are put together.
You just need to know how to use it.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then I have like a copper plate on top of a board that is connected to the device, which is where the paper and the objects go. So it's like kind of like an electrode where you have to have a ground wire to it, and if you don't have a ground wire to it, you can't really make the electric spark. So it has to be connected to the ground, whether it's by you or the device, and then that's how the electricity outputs from the device. I mean, it makes noises, like electric noises when you turn it on.
So you have to wear like a rubber shoes, grounded shoes. Be highly trained to use this contraption.
The intensity of it is like a static electric shock, so it's very, very low intensity compared to something like from the wall or from a computer or something.
Your hair doesn't phase out.
No.
Okay.
It's very, very low intensity, but like once you connect the ground wire to the object, it makes this spark. And that's the spark that penetrates the object and lights up the water actually inside the object.
And that's then what you're capturing?
Yes, because organic materials are considered to be an insulator, so you're not necessarily cooking it, but you're zapping the water inside of it, so that lights up. And since traditional darkroom paper is so sensitive to light, it immediately exposes, and then you develop it. So you immediately get whatever, as soon as you take the ground wire and zap it to the object, that's the pattern you're immediately getting.
Wow.
So it's
fascinating.
Yeah, it's very immediate, which is kind of nice, but at the same time, there's not much room for experimentation in that part. So, I mean, there's high and low intensity or frequencies that you can play in the device, but there's not really much control in terms of how the electricity is outputted in the device itself. So if you think about lightning in the sky, it kind of goes all over the place. You can't really control that.
Sure. And then do you do a whole series of, so let's now, what type of object? Seaweed or a leaf or something along those lines?
Yeah. Recently, I just started to do seaweed because salt water is very conductive to electricity, and so my line of thinking is to think about how the object is absorbed by the type of substance. So, for example, seaweed is absorbed by salt water, regular plants are absorbed by fresh water. I have a few other ideas that use more conductive material that I hope would make something interesting out of it. The whole idea is to work with the light and the conductivity and the elements involved in that.
Oh, it's quite fascinating, and we are looking forward to having you in the Shanties. It's the first time you'll be with the program, so our viewers can come and visit you this summer there and learn more about the process and see these amazing photographs. How else can they get in touch with or see some of your work?
I'm very active online, so you can find me by just searching my name as well, but you can also go to my website, which is kglyphics.com. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that. And
right, you have a blog as well.
Yes.
To share some of the other interests that you have. Well, Kristi, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much.
For Kristi Beisecker, I am Melissa Chartrand, wishing you an artful day.